back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the script to scene segment of Blue Peter's Doctor Who story, Good as Gold, written by a group of children from the school of the Ashton School, and is directed by Sal McEdam. Sorry if I mispronounced his name. This was part of Blue Peter's competition, known only as the Doctor Who script to scene, in which a British primary school would be able to write a Doctor Who script, and the winner, their short little episode, gets filmed. Some people might be a bit puzzled by the fact I've added this segment here in the timeline, mainly because there's actually two script to scene Doctor Who segments, and this is actually the second one. This one aired in 2012 and ties in with the Olympic Games, which we also get some setup for the competition in the forms of small little videos of Doctor and Amy basically asking children all around Britain to write in their scripts and compete in this competition. But there has been one previously. We will talk about that later. The reason I'm putting it here is because canonically it makes more sense. This story only has Amy and the Doctor, whilst we also get bits with in the setting up for this story with the opening of sorts, tying in to the series earlier on, meaning that this story could only really take place in this unique period in time in which Rory had travelled but now has dissipated from the TARDIS team in the form of his death and him being evaporated from the timeline at the end of Hungry Earth and Cold Blood. It's a competition, Blue Peter, for those of you who don't know, was I don't know if it's still going, it might even still be going, but it was like this children's program. A lot of it was like helping kids cook, making some arts and crafts, and they also had these little documentaries about the Amazon deserts or the Aztecs, or part of productions of favourite children programs at the time, and it was basically like the kids' version of the morning show, where it's it's kind of like a news with presented and have some silly presenters, and you also had like some challenges as well with some kids as well. It was a lot of fun. It was going for a long time. I believe it started in the 60s. Doctor Who and Blue Peter have had a vast history with each other. Especially with one episode, Christopher Eccleston makes his only non-Doctor Who appearance as the Ninth Doctor at one point in a very, very brief cameo. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Good as Gold, the second script to scene contest winner of the Blue Peter script and scene segment. But before we actually talk about the small little episode at hand, let's talk about the announcement of the competition. When this story was, when the competition was announced, they do it by these unique in-character perspective, where we get Matt Smith and Karen Gillan playing their respective characters, basically asking their audiences to write in a competition, and all these children and these school children to write in their stories. And this is actually one of the most important, interesting parts in terms of the canon, which is why it's so important to put this story in here. The segments in which the Doctor and Amy are talking to the audience, there's two of them, one with Matt Smith as the Doctor, one as Karen Gillan as Amy Pond, and they're talking and they're basically announcing, it's like, right, there's only one way you can save this, is by writing a script and entering this competition. But they make a point that these stories, these little segments, to introduce the story, are set within the land of fiction. yes, the Land of Fiction returns after its first appearance in The Mind Robber all the way back in I believe it's 1969. It has Zoe in it. Or it could be either 1969 or 1968. It's one of those two. But that is a really obscure reference that a lot of kids, the demographic of this, wouldn't even understand. But it actually helps tie in with the breaking the fourth wall storytelling here with our Doctor and Amy basically just turn directly to the camera and knows that they're basically in a world of fiction. That was the whole point in the Land of Fiction. And they basically explained that currently in the Land of Fiction, there is nothing there. It's completely a white empty void. Whether this is because the writer who did this got it mixed up with the void between normal reality and the real life Land of Fiction, you know, that there's that in part 1 of The Mind Robber, they're in that like white endless void. That wasn't actually the Land of Fiction, but I think the story seems to imply that the actual Land of Fiction has also become a bland white endless void, and so they need the help of the audiences to have imagination beyond anyone's wildest dreams, to create new adventures, to create new stories, and come up with a new story, specifically children. And they also not demand, but one of the requirements seems to be, but it centres around the Olympics, the 2012 Olympics, which actually ties this story to the episode Fear Her, the 10th Doctor adventure, in which he actually takes place in the 2012 Olympics, strangely enough. The Doctor has appeared in this twice. Fun fact, funnily enough, in the Doctor segment of this, he actually is like, kids, think of it, it could be an outer space adventure, it could be an historical past, it could even be centered around the Olympics, but not the 2012 Olympics, because I've already been there and I'd only bump into myself and it'd be very embarrassing. When the actual Good and Gold episode is actually set in 2012 Olympics, which is just too funny to process. But the Karen Gillan one isn't really that interesting. They basically just shoot her right up to close to the TARDIS, so you don't see the background, but clearly it's just like a white brick wall. Whereas the Matt Smith one is seemingly in an endless void with a white screen on the back behind him, and he has these funny jokes about how there's this worm in his ear that somebody imagined, and when he points to one of the viewing audiences, the one near the Justin Bieber poster. He also says that he could get help from Tracy Beaker. Whether that means that Tracy Beaker is, the Doctor's aware of the Tracy Beaker show and it's the Land of Fiction, so he could ask her help, or whether in the Doctor Who canon, Tracy Beaker is a real life person, is a question in the air. But yeah, the 11th Doctor one seemingly is the more interesting of these two, and basically is the announcement of, right, kids, send in your scripts, we're doing it again. And the Doctor also mentions as well about his last appearance with Albert Einstein. However, I'm just decided to ignore that little bit. But what I will point out that in this Land of Fiction universe, the Doctor points out for Amy and Rory, though we don't get to see Arthur Darwell in any of these, and then in the actual Good as Gold self, it's just the Doctor and Amy. So that is why I've put this story here. It kind of implies that in this unseen adventure set within the Land of Fiction, they have an adventure which ties in with the Crack in Time storyline by having Rory appear, but as a fictional entity, and the Doctor kind of reunites with Rory and with Amy, and they have that kind of a fun little adventure off screen, which then leads into Good as Gold. So that's really interesting. And yeah, so we talked about basically these little other clips, but let's talk about Good as Gold itself. And it's mainly, there's nothing really too deep here. I mean, this was written by school children, But it is surprising how well this story seems to flow in terms of the dialogue and just the funness of it. Although there are some cheesy moments, but again, you can get past it because this was generally written by kids. For example, Amy points out in this book that to be an official traveller of space and time, you've got to have an adventure at least once a week. With the Doctor pointed out, it's like, okay then, and he sets controls on the TARDIS, which makes things explode, having his hair all fuzzy, and basically explains that he set the TARDIS to adventure mode. Isn't the TARDIS automatically on adventure mode? Yeah, it doesn't really it doesn't make sense when you think about it too hard. Whether this story is considered canon by the BBC doesn't really matter, because Doctor Who canon is whatever you make it to be, which is the best thing about Doctor Who canon. And so the Doctor's taking Amy around, and we have this, and the majority of the episode is mainly just the Doctor and Amy bouncing off each other, and you do get that loving bash-headed character traits of each character, and they seem to understand each character very well as a light-hearted version of each character, and there's nothing too deep and too gritty here, but it's just how characters really enjoying their own company, and you see that a lot in this episode. And then somebody suddenly walks through the door, an Olympic athlete ready to hold the flame, and is about to take the flame to the idol where he will light the flame to start the Olympics. As we of course know, in Theatre, this turned out to be the 10th Doctor. However, due to the crack in time, that might not actually be the case anymore, because that could be retcon in it so that the Doctor was and those events never happened within this timeline. So that's kind of interesting, and does kind of explain how the 11th Doctor doesn't bump into his 10th incarnation, or 11th incarnation, depending on your point of view, or even 13th. No, it would be 11th because it's before the Meta Crisis Doctor. Wow, I'm rambling here. So that could be a part of the timeline. Now, here's an awesome fact when it comes to the 2012 Olympics. Matt Smith himself actually carried the torch at one point in the city, in the heart of Cardiff. So you could technically put that as canon as well, that when the time altered of the time cracks, the 11th Doctor was the one who carried the torch. Not all the way, but to a part of it in Cardiff. Maybe he saw Torchwood at that point. Who knows? And maybe this ties into that. But it is kind of interesting to know that we have a story with the 10th Doctor taking the flame, a story with the 11th Doctor where he interrupts the flame of the 2012 Olympics, and then in real life, the real Doctor himself, Matt Smith, took the flame. I don't know, I just imagine these stories, even though one of them is not really a story, it's real life, were all a trilogy of accidental 2012 Olympics episodes. It's really bizarre. It is very bizarre. And the athlete, he's confused. He's like, I don't understand what's going on here. It's like, hold on. I just remembered. There's a reason why I didn't see your machine. As he turns around and we see a weeping angel. Yes, this is actually the second appearance of the weeping angels. Actually, they had a cameo in the 2011 story, God Complex. However, that could have been like a fictional version, whereas this is stated to be the real weeping angels. And their inclusion here is really cool. It's a sudden shock, despite the fact that during the Blue Peter segment, before the episode aired, they actually had a behind-the-scenes featurette, which was really cool, and to see the three little girls that wrote this script meet up with Matt Smith and behind the sets and asking a lot of these questions with the producers and the actors must have been an absolute blast. However, in this segment, they basically already described that the Weeping Angels are in this short little episode. So it does kind of ruin the excitement of them, but when you watch this after the fact and you don't know about that, it is a really good, genuine surprise that the Weeping Angels just all of a sudden appear, which kind of adds to their, their mythology in a way that they just kind of just appear in some regards. I do wish that we actually got an actual television story where the Weeping Angels just appear like halfway through an episode like that. It does seem like something which they would thrive in terms of a storytelling method. And it turns out that the Weeping Angel is actually after the flame itself, the actual flame of the Olympics. As the Doctor describes it, the Olympics flame is actually like this energy of symbolism of the heart and spirit of the Olympics and union and connectionness, which is really corny. It didn't really work in Fear Her. It doesn't really work here either. And it feels like at this point it's an advertisement for the 2012 Olympics. It honestly just feels like a trailer to the 2012 Olympics. It's really bizarre. It's really odd. It doesn't quite work for Doctor Who. And the way the Weeping Angel is sort of defeated is kind of bizarre as well. The Doctor kind of uses his sonic screwdriver to seemingly power up the torch to a point where it blows up the Weeping Angel, and it flies in the air, and the athlete actually catches the torch, and it's like, "Thank you, Doctor, here's a medal, you're good as gold, you are." And the athlete goes back outside the TARDIS as he continues his run, and Doctor and Amy are like, "Oh, that was great, now let's go on to an adventure." And we actually end on a cliffhanger, an unresolved cliffhanger, in which the Weeping Angel seemingly is regenerating and is putting itself back together. I absolutely love this. The fact that we don't even get an answer to this does kind of help the creepiness of the Weeping Angels. What did happen to them? How did they defeat them? We may never know. But the fact that at the end of this story, they couldn't defeat them. There was no way that they could have defeated them. Could have defeated this one Weeping Angel, this one threat. Just shows how great they were as a villain. I know it's a really short, silly moment, and Weeping Angels after the Olympics, really dumb and stupid concept, but kids actually wrote this, so you can't put too much pressure on them. But the idea, if the kids were the ones that came up with that cliffhanger, those kids deserve to continue on in the writing business. That is a brilliant little ending right there. And I love that it's not resolved, and I love it was did they survive? Did they get out of this? It kind of leaves it up that there might be, in this version of reality, the Doctor and Amy didn't survive the Weeping Angel, that they took over the TARDIS and caused havoc. Who knows? It's really cool and fun to think about. That's really good as gold. It's a fun little adventure. It's a little bit of fun, it's a little bit of fluff, but for the fact it was created by children, it's actually a surprisingly well executed piece of writing, and I highly recommend it if you're interested. It's nothing too gritty. It's mainly, like I said, fluff, but it's fun, it's enjoyable, and I'd actually check it out for yourself. It's stupid, it's silly, it's goofy, it's cheesy, but you know what, it's not boring, it's not dull, and it actually has some nice surprises along the way. Even if you watch the behind the scenes, which I had before it, and if you're watching this vlog, it's all been spoiled for you anyway. But yeah, go watch it, good as gold. So join me next time where the Doctor and Amy go to a museum and notice something wrong with one of the paintings. So they go back to meet the artist, the magnificent, the one, the only Van Gogh. And I'll see you next time for Vincent and the Doctor. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.